guest on Vinyl and Vision.
Hey folks, thanks for tuning in to the latest episode of Vinyl and Vision. Here we are with episode 72, and today's very special guest is Roger Miller. Now, I'm sure that most of you probably know Roger Miller as one of the members of Mission of Burma, which is amazing. Obviously a great band and an influential band at that. One of the founders, one of the originators of post-punk. But Roger has a extensive musical career. I encourage you to go to his website, which I will provide links in the show notes, rogerclarkmiller.com, which has a massive background of his career, from everything from the rock bands, Mission of Burma, Trinary System most recently, that's his most recent band, the Moving Parts, Sproton Layer, and so on and so forth, in addition to his composed music, his compositions, his experimental music with electrical guitars and keyboards and pianos. All of those things are there, and Roger talks about all of those things on the show, in addition to his conceptual art, which I was not familiar with most of these things. Honestly, I was a surface level fan of Roger's, and I was very happy to be able to speak with him about all of these things, in addition to our main topic tonight, Pink Floyd's Piper at the Gates of Dawn, Pink Floyd's debut album. I don't have a lot of time here, so I'm not going to mention everything that we discussed in the show, obviously, but it was a wonderful conversation. I think that it's incredibly insightful, not only about Roger's background in music and art, but also his own perception of that album and his own interpretations of that album, which I think are incredibly insightful. So stick around and listen up for that. Just want to say thank you, folks, for tuning into this episode. And like we say here at Vinyl and Vision, if you can please do all the things you do with the internet, that would be wonderful. Like, share, comment, rate, review. And rating and review is the most important and most helpful way to support our show, or any show for that matter, free of charge. Nothing to pay, just write a review and give it 5 stars wherever it is that you're listening and participating, and it helps us out. It helps get our numbers up in the ratings and so forth, and it gains us exposure, and that's the best thing you can do. Otherwise, you can go to our website, psychicstatic.net, and do all the things you do there with a financial incentive. Buy anything on our website, and it helps us out financially to keep this thing going. So thank you very much, folks. Enjoy the show. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Actually, one of the groups I'm in, the Anvil Orchestra, we do sound and film accompaniment, and we played the San Francisco Sound Film Festival at the Castro Theater, which is an amazing theater. Totally fun, but I got COVID. It wasn't that bad. I got kind of a mild cold, and then I had kind of a real cold for about 3 days, but it just kind of slowed my life down. I had to quarantine, all that kind of shit.
Right. And when's this?
About 2 weeks ago.
Oh, okay. So you're just about over it?
Yeah. I'm out of it now. And, even a couple of days ago, my brain was a little slow. I was like, why can't I read this music? But today I'm in pretty good shape. So.
Oh, good to hear. Have you ever had it before, or was this the first time?
First time. Like, the Omicron seems to be the most contagious, because I was in Amsterdam with the Anvil Orchestra premiering our new score last November, and that was during Delta, and we're having dinner with Russians, Israelis, and Brits and Dutch, and I got nothing, but you just go to San Francisco and you're fine. I love San Francisco. I love the Castro.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I didn't realize what you had been working on most recently. Because I did do some research. Obviously, I discovered that you are a composer. You work with a bunch of different orchestras. Would you call them? I guess that's an appropriate term.
Chamber groups, or like little
chamber
organizations. Yeah. I mean, actually, just now I had like about half an hour before this Zoom, and I was working on. I have a composition that was supposed to have premiered last, like 2 years ago, but COVID it was supposed to be the beginning of March 15th. And that's when the entire place shut down. And it was with the ICA Boston, Mass MoCA, and the Warhol Museum. and it's called Music for String Quartet and Two Turntables. And I made a record which, once you put the needle down, it plays for the entire 15 minutes, and it's all record noise that I've organized, and the string quartet plays to that. And then I have another record that I kind of scratch along with, not in a traditional scratchy sense, but I interact with the live quartet, integrating it into the turntable. And I think I'm going to be recording that this summer, which is really exciting.
Oh, wow.
And
long overdue. Is that what you're going to say?
Yeah, long overdue. It was supposed to be recorded at one of our concerts, like 2.5 years ago.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's pretty interesting stuff. I mean, like, I didn't realize until recently how proficient you were musically. I mean, obviously you're pretty astute. You read music first and foremost, which is pretty astounding to me because I'm a self-taught person myself.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, yeah, you do all of this chamber music. You play a number of different instruments, correct?
Yes. I mean, I'm mostly, just a second here, I had to get rid of something. Mostly I'm a piano player and a guitarist, but I was mostly a bass player, like in my first band, my psychedelic band, Sproton Layer, from 1969 and 1970, which we recorded an album at the end of my 12th grade, and it's been released on 3 different labels. Third Man's going to put it out next year.
Oh, really? Cool.
Very Syd Barrett, Piper at the Gates of Dawn influenced record. That one is screaming the Syd Barrett influence. But I was a bass player for that primarily.
Oh, okay.
I sometimes sit in with cornet. We're playing, Trinary System is playing with Mini Beast, and I'm going to blow some horn with the Beast. It's like that.
Oh, that's awesome.
Always makes me happy.
Have you played with them before, or?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, both guitar, mostly cornet. We call it trumpet, but really I have this $15 cornet that I bought in 1972, and I've never bought another one, and it's the one I always play. So.
Yeah. But I mean, have you sat in with like Mini Beast before?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. That was, yeah.
Yeah. And besides playing on Mission of Burma records and Trinary System records, but I have sat in with Mini Beast. It's always killer.
Yeah.
I think I add a slight funk dance edge to it. Like I kind of did it, like kind of a horny kind of thing. And then I go off into a miles or a noise out of the horn. But,
yeah.
I don't play very often, so I'm not technically a master or anything, but I can pull it off.
Sure. Well, that sounds great, though. I mean, like, their music is good for it, and the band itself, obviously an improvisational based band. I mean, you can kind of put anything in there, I guess, and it'll work out.
Yeah.
And how is it to play with Peter, like after all these years, like after Burma's disbanded?
It's like not doing anything. It's just like hanging out. There's no problem whatsoever.
Yeah.
I mean, after Burma broke up, I played trumpet and keyboards on Volcano Sun's records. He played on my record, Roger Miller O, which was on Forced Exposure. He and I improvised a couple of tracks. He played bass. I think he played record player on one. So I've always interacted with him very easily.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Let me see here. So let's try to start at the beginning, maybe. I mean, I've looked at your website, so I know a little bit about your history. I see that you grew up in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you were born and raised.
Yeah, and that was there were 2 things that were really cool about that. One, it was a liberal college town, so my schooling wasn't that bad.
Mm-hmm.
And my father studied fish that live in the desert. He was an ichthyologist. He studied fish at the U of M. So every summer we'd go out west into the desert looking for like obscure springs and creeks that we would collect fish in. So it was a kind of an unusual childhood.
Yeah.
To say. And then by the time when the Beatles hit, which I was in 6th grade, I'd already been taking piano lessons, but once the Beatles hit, I was of that generation that when the Beatles came on and they played I Want to Hold Your Hand, before that, I was just a kid. After that, I was a rocker. Like someone had put a magnet to my head and everything was different. And here I still am.
Yeah, right. Was that the Ed Sullivan show?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that did it for a lot of people, right?
Yeah, totally. And so that totally changed me into rock. And then, I was in 9th grade. Between 9th and 10th grade was the Summer of Love. I saw the Grateful Dead play their first show in Ann Arbor. Iggy Pop went to my high school. I saw the MC5 maybe 20 times.
Hmm.
So it was like just an amazing time period for that kind of psychedelic mind expansion.
Yeah, yeah. And you being a teen, I mean, that's fairly young for getting into that type of music and those types of shows, I guess.
Yeah, in the summer of '67, I put my first band together, which my brothers were in. It was a 5-piece, and I mean, I was in ninth grade going to 10th grade, mostly ninth grade. And we're doing, Shapes of Things by the Yardbirds, stuff from the first 13th Floor Elevators album, Kinks, Hendrix, Seeds.
Hmm.
So we're working on stuff like that. And yeah, and that led like a few years later to Sproton Layer. It was my first bona fide psychedelic rock band.
Oh, cool. And so like what was music like in the house for you? Like what did you grow up around?
Well, my dad was very musical. He took piano, or he didn't take it. He studied piano in college.
Hmm.
And he had a choice between studying and becoming a pianist or doing something else to make a living. And I think his mom, who I never met, convinced him that being a professional piano player is probably not the way to make a living. I mean, he played like,
Right.
Chopin, Beethoven. He preferred the classical stuff, but he also we had the Rite of Spring, the Firebird Suite, Stravinsky and stuff like that,
Hmm.
and Dvorak in the house. So we, go to sleep at night and he'd put on, Sanson or Dvorak or, Stravinsky. So it was a very musical family, and my dad liked the fact that I played piano. So when I was after I graduated from high school, I'd come home stoned. I'd sometimes just sit down and play through, play my own stuff, improvising and classical stuff. And he really enjoyed it. So I was, hanging out with my dad, and he didn't know I was stoned, but he didn't, what did it matter?
Yeah,
Just,
that's cool.
just a kid.
Yeah, as long as you're playing. I mean, obviously, he was appreciative of the music and being able to perform anything that matter. I mean, like writing your own material, if not just kind of like improvisational, and then obviously, pulling at his own heartstrings by incorporating some classical elements, right?
Yeah. He liked that. And my parents actually came to see Mission of Burma play at the Second Chance in Ann Arbor in 1980 or 81. And I remember afterwards, my mom said, I didn't understand the music, but you and Clint had great stage presence. And I remember being exceptionally ripped that night on stage. And we're just going completely nuts. And mom thought it was great. So, and my dad, he really liked the musical stuff. And he went to see Bird Songs of the Mesozoic and my Maximum Electric Piano, like more experimental keyboard stuff. And he just loved it. He was in the audience whooping it up like, as
Yeah,
if like a 30-year-old or 20-year-old or whatever.
that's cool.
Yeah.
Oh, so your parents were always very supportive of you, huh?
My dad was. Mom thought that you shouldn't make a career out of music. You should do things like study fish that live in the desert.
That sounds like your dad's mother.
It does, but she couldn't control me and my two brothers. Blair and Ben are also musicians, and I've
Yeah.
played a lot of music with them. And yeah, so she couldn't stop us, unfortunately for her, but fortunately for me.
Yes, very fortunate for you. Um, so music around that house growing up, mostly classical, I guess, huh? Nothing more than that, really.
Well, at sixth grade is when the Beatles hit and everything changed. But up until then, it was classical, a little bit of, Oklahoma, like musicals they had.
Oh yeah.
And, you would sometimes listen to 50s rock and roll. That didn't affect me that much. I just remember being a kid and we'd listen to, Twixt 12 and 20. And, and I knew songs like Chuck Berry, but it didn't
Hmm.
affect me. I was probably too young, but I was 12 when the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan. And literally it was like I could divide my life up before the Beatles and after the Beatles. I mean,
Yeah.
like that 2.5 minutes, I was a different person.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah, totally crazy. Really.
Yeah. And so I see a bunch of records behind you. What is your relationship with vinyl records these days?
Um, I keep what I like. I'm not a collector, but I keep the records that I really like. And I play CDs and I play stuff online too, but I like records. Deb, who I live with and have lived with for a long time, we both like records. We put on, Miles or Eric Dolphy Out to Lunch.
Yeah.
She really likes shellac. She loves mini bees.
Oh,
So
cool. She's
yeah,
got good taste.
she does. She like the funniest thing with her was when I met her, she was working at this place called Arts at the Armory. It was like an arts venue, and I was playing there, accompanying some music, some film.
Mhm.
And, she had never heard of Mission of Burma, and
Hmm.
I thought, this is so cool. I've got a girlfriend. She really likes me, and she's never heard of Mission of Burma. When I played it for her, she goes, "Wow, that's really good stuff." I was like, that's you can't ask for more than that.
Yeah, that is pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like it's a testament to her really liking you. It wasn't just like, oh, I get to be with the guy that was in the band that I liked.
Yeah, there was no precedent for it. She just actually thought that I was okay.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
Plus, she really liked the music too. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, obviously does have good taste. I mean, just from those few bands you've mentioned, it's just like that's nice to have a lady that can appreciate that type of music, you know?
yeah, yeah, totally.
Um, so like what was the like the first record that you remember like buying yourself?
I Want to Hold Your Hand. I saw her standing there at 45, and then Meet the Beatles, the first Beatles album. Then She Loves You, and then I think the next one I bought was probably like the second Dave Clark 5 record, the first Kinks record,
Hmm.
and Animals greatest hit, I think it was. And then from there it just snowballed, you know. And then things changed pretty quickly from British Invasion to, like, by the time I was in ninth grade, the first album had come out. You know,
Hmm.
amazing, amazing record. Uh,
Yeah.
like My Generation, it didn't have a guitar solo, it had a bass solo. I was a bass player and I played French horn, and this guy was a bass player and he played French horn, and whistle. And then the first Elevators record, it was the first record with the word psychedelic. They were the first band to use the word psychedelic. And
Right.
when I heard You're Gonna Miss Me that summer on, the radio station, it was a hit. Uh, I didn't know it at the time, but it was that primal howl of Rocky Erickson that really affected me. And I bought the album, and it just completely, I was gung ho on the Elevators.
Hmm.
They were my favorite band until Piper at the Gates of Dawn showed up.
Yeah. Okay. Well, considering you just mentioned that album, that's the album that we are supposed to be talking about.
Oh,
Um,
very cool.
so going right into it. So right from 13th floor elevators, you got into Pink Floyd.
It was a little more, slightly more convoluted than that, but from the
Okay.
Elevators, I really liked the album After Bathing at Baxter's by the Jefferson Airplane. Around then, I was starting to smoke weed, like fall of '67. It was an excellent weed album. After Bathing at Baxter's, it just kind of moves along, and you're in a half dream state the whole time.
Yeah.
And then a bunch of bands really started pushing things around then, like the first Silver Apples album,
Oh,
uh,
okay.
Oscillations on it. And it was a band it was a drummer and a guy who played electronic instruments, like oscillators. It's like, where did this come from? And my interest tended to be, once I got into it, the more different it was, the more interesting it was. Sometimes I got carried away with that, but
Hmm.
it was pretty darn interesting. We really liked the first Soft Machine album when Wyatt was still in the band. And around that time, I guess it was that band that I had in the summer of '67. Might have been, yeah, it's like, it's been later '67. The guitarist played for me Piper at the Gates of Dawn, and he thought that there's a bass line in Chapter 24 that Roger Waters played.
Yep.
Dun, 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 dun. That's like his only bass line in the whole record almost. And he said, don't you think that's cool? Because I was a bass player, and I wasn't very impressed. Like, I could play that,
Yeah.
I was already a better bass player than Roger Waters, who really is a very good bass player, as far as I was concerned. But so it took me a little while to really beam in on, because when I liked the Elevators, I hadn't actually smoked weed yet or done any of that kind of countercultural thing, which started to happen the fall of '67 and more full steam ahead in '68. Around
Hmm.
the time of Saucerful of Secrets, both those Piper at the Gates of Dawn and Saucerful of Secrets were kind of returning. We would return to those as the records that were kind of, me and my brothers, that we liked. But the time where Piper at the Gates of Dawn became my lodestone. The summer of '67, I'd had that band that did, pretty progressive psychedelic rock music. Then I joined the blues band. Then I started my own kind of neo Cream, neo Hendrix, single riffs with chords in the chorus kind of stuff. And, I could write those songs and we sound like a grade B Hendrix Cream kind of shit. It wasn't really great, but it was a step up and I was writing the songs. And then I wrote a song, and the song is In the Sun, which is on the Sproton Layer album with Magnetic Fields Disrupted. And it's a really unusual riff. And it didn't fit with this band that I had, this kind of neo Cream band. The riff, they couldn't figure out how to play it right. And I was really frustrated. And then my two, you'll hear me say this over and over again. My two brothers, Lawrence and Benjamin, they're twins. And they're 2 years younger than me. The three of us together went through this musical journey. More or less. And our parents went out square dancing. And I don't know why we got this idea, but we said, we're going to get stoned and we're just going to jam on this equipment that my other band had. And we tape recorded it for some reason. We had like was probably like 3 3/4 speed, tiny little 7-inch reel of tape, 3-inch reel of tape, sorry. And we improvised, and it was like nothing any of us had ever done before. It was just, it wasn't just the weed, because we'd been smoking weed before, like for over a year. It was just something about our brains being ready to do this expanding thing, or hearing enough expanded stuff around us that we felt free to do it. And we would just, riffs would mutate out of anywhere. It wasn't like blues rock. It had nothing to do with blues rock. And when we were done with the session and listened to it, we realized that the closest thing in the world was Interstellar Overdrive. Like that instrumental section where things just pulse along. There's a beat, but then, keyboards and guitars would fuse and form and then fall apart, and something else would come to the fore. And that's what it was doing with us as a rock trio. And after that, Piper at the Gates of Dawn was the godhead for me at that point.
Yeah. So
things shifted, like really shifted.
Right.
We liked that. We liked Saucer Full of Secrets. I'd written some kind of Saucer Full of Secrets-y, kind of dreamier kind of piano pieces, The Wizard King or something or other, or Hilltop, a couple songs, Fall of '68, that were kind of a starting towards me finding my voice. But this was like completely different. We were way inside it. We weren't just looking at the ideas. The ideas were part of our lives.
Right. So now it's funny. I was just thinking about this because you were mentioning some of the bands that you were kind of getting turned on to, some of the stuff that was leading up to getting into Pink Floyd, 13th Floor Elevators, Silver Apples. Who was showing this music to you? How did you get turned on to that stuff?
We lived in Ann Arbor. It was a real asset. And Detroit was like, Russ Gibb, probably don't know who Russ Gibb is, or the Grandy Ballroom or the Easttown Ballroom. But if you lived in Detroit, those are legendary people. It was the equivalent of the Fillmore East or the Fillmore West, the Grandy Ballroom. Every band.
Okay. Right.
I mean, I saw the Airplane there. Later on, I saw Captain Beefheart on the Lick My Decals Off tour, Pink Floyd, Hawkwind, all those bands. Alice Cooper. So around, I guess it was probably '68, was when radio stations started, like college stations always did unusual stuff, but radio became, there was some AOR, album-oriented rock. At that point, it was radical, then it later became not very radical, but they would play the non-hits. And so I was able to, just by listening to the radio, I remember hearing the Silver Apple song Oscillations. I go, oh my God, I have to get this album, or you'd see on TV The Crazy World of Arthur Brown, pretty much an over-the-top record, but there's no guitars on it, drums, or bass, and then it was orchestrated with strings and trumpets. So it appealed to my classical elements, but it had this kind of mania of relentless creative activity, which I was really into. So that there was a mixture of that. We had lots of friends. My brothers had friends. I had friends. I was in high school. People would talk, and bring over records to our house. We were kind of a meeting place at my parents' house. People would bring over records all the time.
Right.
So we heard everything that was going on. It was really really incredibly magical time, like 67 through 70.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, some great, amazing albums came out in that year and in that period. I mean,
Yeah.
if you think about it, just like Jimi Hendrix and Cream and what else, whatever. Obviously, you're listening to Silver Apples and 13th Floor Elevators and stuff like that. So yeah,
Yeah. And people don't talk about Procol Harum very much, or they dismiss them, but like Salty Dog, that's just an amazing, amazing record.
hmm.
And again, that appealed for my classical sense of growing up with classical music. But we also, I saw the Stooges on their record release party for their first record, so I was there too. Like I also like the Stooges, as well as hearing Gary Brooker sing "Salty Dog" with a string orchestra about
Right.
sailing ships. I was just as
Yeah.
happy to hear about Iggy complaining about 1969 or complaining about 1970.
Right, right. Well, so it's funny though, because like, I mean, looking back at it now, obviously we've had all this time and then history has kind of like, really kind of made things out of certain people and certain acts, like the Stooges being mentioned. Or, I mean, you talk about them now and they're heralded as like, one of the, predecessors of post-punk, proto-punk. And, but if you, look at their history, when they were first coming out, that first record of theirs, I mean, it wasn't really liked very well. It certainly wasn't revered in the way that it is now.
Not at all.
Yeah. So I mean, how was that for you? I mean, like being there. I mean, like 'cause obviously you liked it, and so you're obviously one of these like for some reason influencer came into my mind as like that's not what it was back then, but one of these people that understood it and appreciated it even though it wasn't popular.
Yeah, I mean, we were in Ann Arbor, and Iggy and the Stooges were in Ann Arbor, so everybody in Ann Arbor knew I Want to Be Your Dog. Like
Yeah.
that was, but in a way, by then I was already writing pretty sophisticated music in Sproton Layer. Like, we would. This is kind of a cliche for me to say now, but when my dad heard that this kind of psychedelic rock music that incorporated a lot of classical experimentalism, he encouraged us to go to see the University of Michigan new music concerts. So it was not uncommon that we would see the MC5 in the afternoon and then go to the University of Michigan and see like, Stockhausen or Penderecki at night. So, and we'd be stoned in the afternoon and stoned at night, which, ultimately isn't as important as we make it out to believe that it is.
Yeah.
But particularly if you're stoned, things start to blend together. Your ability to discriminate gets blurry.
Sure.
And so to me, Penderecki and the Stooges, sure, why not? And that leads to, Mission of Burma, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, yeah. That's crazy. Huh. So I was thinking about it like so the record you chose for tonight for us to talk about was Pink Floyd's Piper at the Gates of Dawn, which obviously it was important to you. You already told me about like when you first heard it, but like what was it about it that you think like made you wanted to choose that record for this show today?
Right. Well, again, like after that first session with me and Lauren Ben, where we recorded this improvs, we were like, we thought we were doing something super radical, and it was pretty radical. Some people thought we sounded like the MC5 doing Starship, that kind of thing, because we'd seen the MC5 15, 20 times. But it was more the Piper at the Gates of Dawn. And also, I mean, what it was is that he wasn't playing blues licks. All of Interstellar Overdrive or Astronomy Domine, there's a hint of blues in there, but it's just as influenced by Stockhausen or Sun Ra. Whether he saw Sun Ra or not, I don't know. But Sid was a fan of AMM, the very super experimental band, and it was not very popular, but in England, in London. And so the idea that he would play music that wasn't blues based and any sound you wanted was important. Like on the song Lucifer Sam, which is kind of almost like a spy theme or related to Batman or something. It's got that kind of dark, creepy quality.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for the lyrics, it would be kind of goofy, but the lyrics are really amazing. But in it, there's these guitar sounds that are, you don't even know what they're made from. Like there's scraping of strings or a piece of cloth being ripped.
Yeah.
And I mean, I still don't know what they are. Like I could sit down with you or somebody who's really knowledgeable and say, okay, we're going to figure out what every one of these sounds are. And we probably couldn't do it. I mean, the other lodestone as an electric guitarist for me is Hendrix, but it's almost so obvious that I don't even want to say it, but it's a fact.
Sure.
And, his use of feedback is just the fact that he could wrestle that stuff that you weren't supposed to do. Again, both Barrett and he and the free jazz guys, which I became familiar with a little while later, they take the honks and the squeaks and they'd organize them. All the sounds that you weren't supposed to get out of your instrument, they would turn it into music. And Barrett was doing that, and Hendrix was doing that. With the controlling the feedback, and he would, he'd really work it so that he would make that which was rejected into something like, a creative masterpiece.
Right. So now I'll probably mention something about this later on, but in listening to some of the Burma catalog, I'm not sure if I hear it as clearly as I hear it in Trinary System, your most recent rock band project. As far as guitar playing and sounds and guitar sounds are concerned, like I don't hear as close of a connection to the Syd Barrett of like Piper at the Gates of Dawn style. Was there something else that you think was more of an influence on the Burma period of your songwriting?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like my band Sproton Layer was a very psychedelic rock band, though 69 and 70, and it was very Syd Barrett influenced. If you ever heard the album, it's called With Magnetic Fields Disrupted, you would right off the bat go, oh yeah, these guys were total Barrett heads. Some of the songs are almost like Barrett-esque knockoffs, but they're not bad. But those kind of ideas with the Sproton Layer, it was filtered through psychedelia, which was Barrett's mode. When I took those same energies but filtered it through punk rock, which Barrett was not, you don't think of Barrett as being an aggressive guy who's yelling at people from the stage. That's not really his thing. He's more of a total introvert. And so I filtered those ideas through the punk rock aesthetic. I love the Stooges and I love Ron's playing on it, but his playing never influenced me. It was way too straightforward for me. But the album Verses, or I consider to be our best album, I do 3 kind of epic guitar solos on there. Einstein's Day, which plays scales, but it's very unlike Barrett. But Weatherbox and Fun World. Fun World is all harmonics. Like I never once press the string to the neck. In Weatherbox, I don't do the same thing. I just hold the guitar silent and I just wave back and forth in front of the amp. And so the feedback by the position of the pickup go. So 2 of those solos, the more radical ones, I wasn't even pressing my fingers on the guitar neck, which is kind of contrary to punk rock. Like you're supposed to be really physical, and this was like super abstract. But the music was so physical that you didn't really notice that, I don't think. But those kind of ideas to me came from both Hendrix and Barrett. And Fred Frith later on, his school of guitar playing was also really interesting. But to me, those are Barrett-esque filtered through punk rock. I mean, they don't really sound like Barrett.
Right.
And I would say that, and we haven't talked about Barrett's lyrics, but a lot of his lyrics are very dreamlike. And, in Burma, I mean, some of those lyrics, they're like, you transformed my life into a dream. Like at the bottom of the well, there's a seed, there's a pit. It's like, that could be a dream. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's from the song Fun World. So that element from Barrett, where it was a mixture of childlike innocence, and I'm kind of a late bloomer. Like I'm 70 now, but I don't really act like it, which is working to my advantage at present.
Sure.
But I was a little late out of the box other places. So Barrett's childishness really appealed to me at that time, like, fantasy, but behind any of those fantasies, there's the dark fantasy too. And that's, like fairy tales aren't really as chipper and sunny as you think they are. If you analyze fairy tales, there's darkness in all of them. So, and Barrett's songs like Lucifer Sam or Astronomy Domine, other songs, they become more dreamlike, and which is very suitable towards being stoned or tripping, because when you're in a psychedelic state, it's like you're dreaming out loud. You're dreaming as you exist in the world. That's how I perceive the psychedelic state.
Okay.
And that's what Barrett was like. And that I took a lot of that, like my lyrics in Mission of Burma are very, most people would complain like, I can't make any sense out of this shit, but it's more like dream stuff. And it's the same. There's more of that still in Trinary System too. That kind of the Barrett, the words he used. But I got off track because we were talking about the guitar.
No, that's okay, because we're going to get into that actually as well. We might as well go ahead and start to try to tackle it. Piper at the Gates of Dawn, originally released on August 5th, 1967. By the way, do you have the UK release or the American release?
Both.
Oh, okay. So because the track listing is a little different.
Yeah. The mono one, when it came out, I think I have the mono. And then I saw Pink Floyd in fall of '68 for the Saucerful of Secrets tour at a club called the Fifth Dimension, where I did psychedelic lettering so I could get into a lot of shows for free. It was the Saucerful of Secrets kind of stuff, which was later more documented on Ummagumma. It was a lot kind of long and spacey and broad, and I was expecting more of that kind of crazed mania of like some of the compressed songs on Piper at the Gates of Dawn. And but I heard they did Astronomy Domine, which is not on the American Piper at the Gates of Dawn.
Right.
Next day I was downtown. I was at the record store, 10th grade, and I heard that song. They were playing that, they were playing records. And I said, oh my fucking God, they're playing the song I just heard last night that I had never heard before. And I went up, and that's when I saw the English Piper at the Gates of Dawn, which had 3 different songs. Flaming, Piper at the Gates of Dawn. Maybe there's only 2 different ones. There might be another one on there. The track list is completely different.
Yeah, right. So we're gonna cover the original UK release.
Okay.
All right. Let's go ahead and start getting into it, and we'll start with the first song, Astronomy Domine.
Yeah, and that was the song that got me to buy the English version. What's cool about it is it has that chromatic descending line, very similar to Interstellar Overdrive. Dee, 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 dee. And it starts off with that organ, like little beacons from outer space, and the guy's talking, listing like planets and gods, and then the whole thing erupts, and it's just God. And what I liked about it is that you're talking about outer space, and then later on he's talking about the water, the green limpid water underground, like going in caves underground. He
Right.
managed to tie the outside and the inside together in just this astonishingly beautiful way, and it ends up on the D major chord. Like he resolves it in a peaceful fashion.
Yeah. How weird.
Burma covered that. When he died, we played that, and when we played it in Brooklyn, the guy said he cried when we played it, and we played it really, really well because I was channeling Barrett. I was singing it and playing all the Barrett riffs, and so
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, that's like really something.
That's cool. So this song, I mean, let's see. So just trying to analyze the song a little bit. Domine, it's kind of Latin for the word Lord. So this kind of this sense of larger than life kind of song about space in general. But there's a mention of Dan Dare in one verse. Do you ever catch that?
Yeah, and I found out later it's a comic strip. There's like a outer space comic strip in England that we never had.
Yeah. It was a British sci-fi science fiction comic hero created by illustrator Frank Hampson. So it seems to me that it's possible that in an acid haze, Barrett may have focused intently on this comic and the relationship to planet, stars, and space and so forth. What's that?
It could be.
Yeah, I mean, because I was reading a little bit about his biography, and there was some quotes from some friends of his, some close friends, childhood friends, that had said that they would have like these, acid parties essentially, and that they would get essentially you would just really focus on a topic, like one thing, and like I guess there's a tribute to this on is it the cover of Madcap Laughs where it's sitting in a room that's mostly bare with just a prune and an orange, is it? Or
Something, I'm not sure exactly what it is. I bought the album when it came out, and in the back, his girlfriend's in the distance.
yeah, yeah. But so some story about him focusing on these pieces of fruit
I see.
and like just kind of so deep into it, just kind of like mesmerized by them, as like seeing them as planets and stuff like that. Like,
Sure.
yeah.
I can get that.
So I think I've already asked you a little bit about this, but where do you find or what do you look to for inspiration for songwriting?
Uh, I don't know.
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
just kind of comes out of nowhere.
a riff shows up. I'm always playing guitar, and a riff will show up, or I might think, Trinary System, because that's my band now. It's like, well, we need something like this. Like we need a song that's more something like this, and then I start messing around until I find it. Uh,
Yeah. So do you start with the music and then lyrics come after the fact?
almost always music first, but I also, I keep a journal, and I'm a writer as well, and I'll write down little phrases that amuse me. Like, I lead a modular life. That's just a fact about my life is modular. Like my Deb, who I live with, she has a very rigid, she goes to work and she works till here. And she said, well, today I have off. And I go, okay, my life is modular. So I can just push this over here and I can adapt here. Most of my things that I do, unless I'm playing a show or have to travel somewhere, if it's modular. Like right now, it's not. I have to meet with you at this time.
No, you don't have to. You could have blown me off.
That's
but
right.
but I get what you mean, because I mean you live an artist's lifestyle, so it's just like you're a creative, and the whatever you create is kind of the way you live.
Yeah. And so I would just, like, when I need lyrics, sometimes I'll just go through my journal and I saw that line, I lead a modular life, which I probably wrote down some evening after a few beers, thinking this is funny. And that
Hmm.
became the theme for one of the songs on Trinary System, lyrically.
Right.
So, and also, I mean, sometimes I just start thinking about stuff, but lyrics are harder than music. It's easy to come up with riffs. To make the words not sound stupid is more difficult.
Right. And so, well, so is there anything that you can attribute to like your lyrical styling or the words that you choose to write?
Again, I would say Barrett had a lot to do with that. I'll often go to dreams uh, for inspiration, just to get. It's kind of like psychedelic, like I mentioned earlier. I believe that being stoned or tripping, when you're in that kind of psychedelic state, you're dreaming out loud. As you live, you are dreaming simultaneously.
Hmm.
And so this way, I can get that same kind of effect without taking psychedelic drugs.
Oh, okay. So you don't take any more any you
Uh,
don't take them anymore?
LSD and stuff like that, not a long time. I'll sometimes smoke some weed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not
I've
a
actually never done any hallucinogenics. I mean, just mushrooms, but I don't consider that to be like real hallucinating.
uh Yeah, I mean, I did mushrooms a couple of times. It was very relaxing. Made me feel very calm.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree with that. But that's the thing. I've never had one of those major psychedelic trips, like using acid or LSD or anything like that.
Well, whatever. I think it was important for Western culture to go through that. I'm not sure if it's important now. Like, things change.
Yeah.
It's important with what the culture needs.
Yeah. I'm afraid it's going to break my brain at this point.
There is something. It's a younger person's job because it takes a lot out of you. Like, when you're tripping, you drop acid at 4 o'clock and you're up till 5 o'clock the next morning.
Mm.
And you've got an entire day where your sleep patterns are off, and you've also kind of exhausted yourself by going through. It's a lot of intensity to go through like a psychedelic experience, and so you're kind of like burnt out, and it takes a couple days to really assimilate and put yourself back together from it, in a way.
Yeah.
One
Shoot.
way.
Missed my window.
I'm sure your life is just as rich.
Yeah, I hope so. I guess so. I mean, but now I can't compare it. I can't say if that's true or not, but it's all right.
Well, since I've taken LSD, how would I know if I didn't take LSD?
Yeah, I don't, it's one of those things, huh? I don't know. Well, maybe one day. I don't know. Who knows? I'm still kind of young.
You are.
All right. Well, let's move on to the next song, Lucifer Sam.
Totally cool riff. And again, I think I mean, it's so that's more like a traditional song of the era, in the same way that like Hendrix or Cream, like let's say "Sunshine of Your Love," it was a riff dun, 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 that just played over and over again, and then the chorus has chords. Now in Lucifer Sam, it's just that riff, but it goes through it, and then it goes that something I can't explain. You finally get the chords C to D. So in a way, it's the most traditional song on the record, except it's just so out there. You know, it's so unusual.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know it's about a specific cat that he called Lucifer Sam, but you know, he's talking about witches, and you know, and I'm sure he's projecting all these things at the same time. You know, like it's all, you know, in the psychedelic experience, things, different types of meanings merged together, or like dreams. Like in a dream, you can have really outlandish things that don't belong together in a dream, and they make sense in the dream. And again, right. It's kind of like the psychedelic experience.
Oh yeah, yeah. And there's a lot of that on this record.
Yeah, a lot of that, a lot of those things. And but yeah, Lucifer Sam and that guitar solo, you know, it's just, you know, with the bass doing along with it, and then it's, you know, he kind of plays what you might almost think of as being regular riffs, but he doesn't, and they just become sounds going, you know, it was more like, you know, you poke a hole in consciousness and this other stuff comes out from the other side. That would be like a Jungian kind of statement there. But the danger is if you live too far in the other side, you don't find your way back, and that's what happened to Barrett.
Right.
That's the truth, is getting a balance.
Right. So this song, Lucifer Sam, originally titled Percy the Ratcatcher. So what I discovered was that I consider the song actually to be quite a bit of lyrical genius going on here when you really break it down. From what I've learned in research, there's two major interpretations of the song, where people have said that the song is kind of as simple as him writing about his cat, or that it's just as simple as him writing about his girlfriend at the time, Jenny Spires. Which,
gentle. Yep, there we go.
Yeah, I mean, like lyrically, if you really like analyze the words, there's a kind of what you were just mentioning, how like it's this blending of things. Like, yes, he may have started writing the song like kind of just, you know, picking off of his surroundings and seeing his cat and start getting into that. But then there's subconsciously, there's this thing about his girlfriend who, you know, I guess maybe they were having a falling out at the time, or kind of like slowly, you know, separating. So there's a little bit of that awkwardness of like this relationship with this woman that he's in, or her. There's some, I can't remember the words for the life of me right now, but
you're the left side, he's the right side. Oh no, it's like they're kind of divided. They're supposed to complement each other, but they're divided. And oh no isn't really a good way to end the topic.
Right. So it might be that childish kind of like naivety that he kind of writes with, just kind of being like simply putting it, just you're going one way, I'm going the other.
Right.
But yeah, but I don't know. Overall, a really great song, and this song has been covered by a lot of people. I guess it's one of their more popular songs.
Yeah, I mean, it's got that heavy riff, and that easily locked people into it. Yeah, Trinary System has played it. I've done it solo before, and what, you know, I really like, it was something that they did a lot on Piper at the Gates of Dawn. When it hits the end, that gets something I can't explain, and then they just kind of go off droning on that drone, and just sounds appear, new melodies that don't have any direct correlation. Mm-hmm. Very much like, I mean, Norman Smith produced it, who did Sgt. Pepper's, and even on some of the Beatles songs, the song would end like, even like A Hard Day's Night. Think about that. It's been a hard day's night. Then I go beanie, and it fades out with a sudden arpeggio that's never been in the entire song. And this is pre-psychedelic. So if you look at it's kind of almost modeled after A Hard Day's Night. That's one way of looking at it. You know,
Sure, sure. That's a pretty cool interpretation that I would not nearly have put together myself, I'm sure. Um, but so like this song, as we were saying, was is a popular song, and it's been covered a lot. Obviously, you've done your own covers of it yourself. I was curious though, how many times has Burma been covered that you know of? Any recorded covers?
many Graham Coxon from the band Blur,
Uh-huh.
Fame and Fortune and Revolver on one of his albums. A local band, I can't remember what they're called now, did Active in the Yard, very obscure Mission of Burma song. Tommy Keene did Einstein's Day. Lots of people have done Academy. REMs have done Academy Fight Song.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't know. I can't.
Yeah, you can't recall exactly. That's okay. But what is that like for you to hear these bands, especially that pedigree of names that you've just mentioned, covering your music?
That's pretty cool. Usually, what I note is that they tend, like Mission of Burma, we would hardly ever play regular chords. Like if there was a way to make the chords slightly different, we would do that. Both Clint and I, especially in the first phase, because Pete only started writing later on. Uh, and almost all my chords are unorthodox, and half of Clint's chords are unorthodox. And when people would cover our songs, they would straighten the chord out. So it would be, instead of being this A927, it would be an A major with a, you know, something else. And so they would often straighten the chords out. And I'm always the most impressed when people don't do very much of that. Like, oh, they really got excited if they don't straighten it out.
Right. They've somehow managed to figure out what you were playing.
Really listen. Like I was staying at REM was big Burma fans, and when I was in Birdsong's the Massazoak, we'd stay with Stipe and sometimes Peter Buck. And I remember one time staying with Peter Buck, and he goes, "Damn it, Roger, I'm trying to learn how to play Academy Fight Song and I can't do it." And I said, "Well, it's Clint's song, but he tuned the top two strings down. So the E is tuned down to a D and the B is down to a B flat. So the top is a G minor chord." And he goes, "Wow." And then, of course, I showed him the riff and he immediately got it. But, you know, as far as I'm concerned, he should have been able to hear by the fact that the strings were droning, like they never stop. And they're just going, they're sitting there shimmering through the entire damn song. Yeah. There must be a reason how they're doing that. So as far as I'm concerned, he should have been able to figure out that the strings were detuned. But, you know, he's a nice guy. He was really nice to us. And so I'm not going to complain.
Yeah, right. Well, that's pretty interesting though. I mean, that's just one of those things though. It's like I don't have a sophisticated ear. I can't figure this stuff out. I can barely even figure out a regular song, like a normal kind of tuned song.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. Almost all Burma songs are peculiar. At heart, they're unorthodox.
Right. That's cool. I like that. Let's move on to the next song, Matilda Mother.
Matilda Mother.
That
fading in organ at the beginning, it's again, that's like you're late at night and you're stoned and the chords seem to be coming out of the clouds, you know, like, because it's such a psychedelic era. So yeah, it still sounds great to me. And I hardly smoke weed at all. Again, I mean, here's the childhood element, but instead of just like talking about fairy tales, he's talking about, you know, it seems to be, he's talking about his mother reading them to him when he was little, but then why aren't you still doing it? Like, you only have to read the lines and everything shines. Like, well, why aren't you doing it? You know, he wanted her to tell the story so he could see these images, you know, across the stream with wooden shoes and clouds of sunlight floating by. It's kind of almost like just a yearning for childhood in that respect. You know, like, yeah. I mean, that's pretty obvious, but
yeah, I guess so. I mean, I that's kind of what I learned doing the research. I didn't necessarily hear it as I was listening to the music, but yeah, just as you're saying, kind of the lyrics quote fragments of fairy tales as read from a book to the singer by his mother, reading the scribbly black, referring to the writing in a book as a child sees it.
And the idea of the scribbly black and everything shines. Fucking brilliant. That's like just those two, the little couplet there, or whatever it is. You know, it's black and it shines. How could that be? Like, scribbly black and everything shines. It's
Right.
transforming the darkness into the brightness, the back and forth.
Right. Or the way that he interprets it as he's hearing these words read by his mother.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
And really fascinating. It's pretty fascinating. And, we all know that he really liked, like the English whimsy, like Lewis Carroll, which I also, when I was in fourth grade, I read, and I always liked that kind of stuff. So again, Barrett's sense of nonsense, kind of childish play,
mhm.
but a sophisticated childish play, because Lewis Carroll is not just a little kid, like Through the Looking Glass is a masterpiece.
Right. Yeah. So Matilda Mother represents a common theme in Barrett's work, as you were already kind of like discussing, his nostalgia for childhood and awareness that it could not be regained.
Right.
Would you say you have any common themes you rest heavily on in your music?
Probably.
Nothing that jumps out at you, though. Nothing that seems pretty evident.
No, but I mean, like in Burma Day, like the song "Fun World," when you are young, they kick you in the head, and when you grow up, they're still fucking with your head. So when I found out, this is a pretty good line. I actually, they're good lyrics here. When I found out what it was I didn't want, I got new armor and I started to hunt. Like that's a pretty good couplet. That's a Barrett-esque, almost a Barrett-esque couplet, but a little darker, a little more punk rock. If Barrett had been a punk rock instead of a psychedelic, look at the flowers, it's more like, I'm in the back of a gutter. So,
Right.
So that the idea of resisting that which is trying to control you and tell the world to fuck off. I would say those are kind of you're not going to, that is some of the theme.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's obviously not all you write about, but that's just something that sticks in your mind that is common.
Even in the song "Modular Life," I won't stand in line for something that I really do not want. That's one of the lines in it. It's like, you trying to tell me that's what I want? Well, fuck you. I'm not doing that.
Right. So nonconformity in general, I suppose.
And that I consider that to be an asset.
Right. I agree with that. So considering what I just mentioned to you about Sid and this seeming obsession with childhood innocence and nostalgia for it, can you see anything from your childhood that may have been inspirational or thought-provoking in a way?
Well, yeah. I mean, really the most profound thing about my childhood was that literally every summer between my age of 2 and 18, I think I mentioned my father studied fish that live in the desert.
You're right.
We would go to the desert. In the summer, we drive out, we go to meetings, the ichthyologist and herpetologist meetings, and then we go to like Nevada, Arizona, Utah, and we just be in the middle of the desert, like nowhere. We just pull off to the side of the road, kick out the rocks, throw down our tarps, and pull out our sleeping bags. And if it rained, you pulled the tarp over you, and all you saw was the stars over your head.
Yeah.
That I think really profoundly influenced me in that we're just like there was 5 kids in my family, and I always thought my family was super dysfunctional until I grew up, until I realized compared to other people, it really wasn't that bad. I mean, family, you may have a perfect family. I'm not saying you don't.
Oh, I don't.
Nobody does. But I thought it was so dysfunctional. Now I realize it wasn't nearly as dysfunctional as I thought. And I'm still tight with my brothers, and my family always got along after a certain point. After like the psychedelia left and I found my own voice, I could come back on my own terms, and it was pretty good.
Right.
So we would be like a self-contained family group in the desert. We'd go out there with water and food for like a week. We wouldn't see anybody for a week. Maybe some students would be helping us collect fish. All the food was cooked over Coleman. And at night while mom was cooking, we'd be running around the sagebrush looking out for rattlesnakes and stuff. So that kind of self-reliance and rejection of the norm. Like we didn't stay in motels even, I think we stayed in one motel the entire time we were out in the desert. We just camped. And,
right.
So that I really think if there was like one takeaway from my childhood, that's the most profound one.
Okay. I like that. It's very unique.
Yeah, it was. And sometime around 11th grade, I realized, most families don't go out to the desert looking for fishes every summer. It was kind of, I started to become more self-aware, and I go, oh,
Yeah.
this is, weird. Huh.
Most people would say like, what? Why would you go to the desert? You go to the ocean for find fish.
Right.
Yeah.
My joke later would be we'd see the fish flopping around the desert, and we'd pick them up with tweezers and put them in a bucket. They'd just be flopping on the sand.
Yeah, yeah. That's great.
Was not
So
the case.
weird.
We also looked for fossils too, like fossil fish. So, and my dad compared the fossils with a living fish. That was the whole thing. So this sense of a trippy duration of time, like millions of years. We're talking about
Right.
the research was millions of years. So astronomy domine, you'll see the stars, they're millions of years away. It's actually not that distant.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very crazy stuff. So the next song was Flaming. I don't have anything for that song. I found it very difficult to figure out, or not even, research wise, I couldn't find very much about it.
Instrumental section in it. Again, it's like one of those, I guess it's what they did a lot in their concerts. So there'd be like a loose theme, and then they just make sounds. And I think Norman Smith, despite the fact that he complained that they weren't very good musicians, he was the engineer for the Beatles album. The Piper at the Gates of Dawn was his first solo production. Norman
Right.
Smith. He'd worked on Sgt. Pepper's, I think, or just before Sgt. Pepper's.
I think you're right. Yeah, I can't remember which record either. But he had been working with the Beatles. I want to say it was something a little earlier than that. Something that was kind of like pre-psychedelic stuff.
It could have been Rubber Soul even.
Maybe.
But you can see that somebody there already had an idea of how to use the studio. Like there's all these sounds we can get. We can bring these. There's probably like little tinkling bells. They probably had some stuff in the studio, like a lot of studios do. And then Barrett's hyperactive imagination at that time, I'm sure he was just like, wow, let's just go.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, speaking of the Beatles, I know that when they were recording this album, the Beatles were doing Sgt. Pepper's across the hall, like in the next studio.
Yes, I know McCartney said that his favorite new band was Pink Floyd, and Lennon and Sid Barrett recorded a song which I've heard, like Mary Jane, tempting in the piano. I can't remember. Well, it's not very good. It's just a couple of stone guys with a tape recorder, and it's the idea that Barrett and Lennon were just jamming together really kind of cheers me up.
Yeah, that's a very strange duo. I'd never heard of them doing anything together.
There's something Mary Jane. What a shame, Mary Jane. Something or other.
Right.
And it wasn't supposed to be released or anything. They just happened to record them jamming.
Right. That's cool. Well, so then the song After Flaming is the how do you pronounce this? Power Tot H?
It's spelled differently inside the record also. But basically power toke. Like that's how we perceive it. Like in Detroit, toking, maybe everywhere. Toking is smoking weed.
Yeah.
And the MC5, like, let's go to the toke down. So we would call it a toke down when we smoked weed.
Mm-hmm.
Very much like a MC5 kind of thing. So power toke. So it was a power toke, basically. And a power toke, from what we knew, was you put the pipe, and then the person would blow on the pipe so that you would a massive amount of smoke, like 4 times the normal amount of smoke, would get inside, and you might be coughing, but you would be suddenly massively stoned, and that was called a poke toke, or the toke that put you over the edge to got you super high.
Oh, okay. So is that how you understand this song, as kind of like being that? It's just like being that psychedelic and trippy?
Yeah, they were just, and I mean, it's just an instrumental with like 2 or 3 themes.
Right.
At the beginning, it's got the funny vocal stuff. Woo, 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 and then there's just kind of a swinging, it's almost like a low-key jazz piano thing with a simple 1 chord.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes into the descending chords, and you get the feedback, really interesting feedback and stuff in there. And then it fades out, and there's that new bass theme. Ding, 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 ding. And so it's just basically 3 themes that are almost unrelated, but they're put together, and when it's done, they come back with the screaming and the yelling and the feedback, and it ties it all together. And that's a very stoned, like when Sproton Layer had a lot of songs like that also, that seemingly irrational. It would start one way, very briefly, and then it would switch to something completely different, which is a very stoned kind of thing. If you're stoned, your attention will suddenly shift. But also at that time in like serious music, like not necessarily Stockhausen, but that kind of thing, they would do like lots of irrational structural shifts in their compositions. So there's kind of a precedent for it in new music directions, as well as just stoned out rock musicians. It's somewhere between the two, which suited me just fine.
Yeah. So what I learned about this song was that it has been said that it was a conscious effort by the band to produce a sequel to Interstellar Overdrive. That's kind of interesting. I mean, it doesn't tie into anything that I have to say about the song really, but I just thought that was some fun little bit of knowledge.
Yeah, you're reading a book I've never read because you're getting all sorts of information.
I really do a lot of research on the album and then each song individually and so forth. And, I do kind of try to read books now when I can, if I have enough time. So,
yeah, I mean, to me, the song that makes sense. It's a little more. Interstellar Overdrive is more like a jazz theme. There's the head, then there's the jam, and then there's the head. Like at the end, the head comes back. That's a jazz kind of tradition. Whereas this one, there's more like three completely discrete themes, but it's all super loose and improvisatory.
Yeah. See, now I didn't know that about yourself. I didn't know like how comfortable you were with the idea of improvisation or jamming. Even I hate that word. I hate the word jamming, and I hate the connotation of like, hey, let's jam. But what are your thoughts on jamming?
Oh, I believe. I mean, again, that first session that my brothers and I had was all completely freeform improvisation.
Right.
That was where we found the truth. And I built some of that into some of the songs from Sproton Layer. And sometimes I'd use those riffs and compose out of them. But, I believe that, Eric Dolphy's music is every bit as good as Bela Bartok's music. Like jazz is as good as classical music.
Mm-hmm.
Vice versa. I did a record with my brother Ben called M2 at Land's Edge. It really, really, I think an excellent album. It's on Feeding Tube. I'm playing prepared piano, like a heavily prepared piano. And my brother Ben is playing a guitar like on a tabletop with pickups on both ends. And it's all freeform improvisation. Someone who saw us do a performance said they thought it was like the middle section of 1983, A Merman I Shall Turn to Be.
Oh,
which
that's cool.
Like, well, yeah, look, that's a good, never occurred to me until this person said that. But yeah, I mean, it's psychedelia remains in my genes, but freeform improvisation, and I've studied a lot of jazz. An album that my brothers and I did called the Fourth World Quartet, 1975, was released last year on Cuneiform. It's basically a jazz record.
Cool.
Heavily improvised. So I believe that improvisation is very important.
Yeah, and I particularly liked that you said that it's the truth.
Right, because there's no time to build a facade.
Yeah,
right. The song structure, I want to go out with a grand ending, and I can like build the 5 4 da, da, da. But when you're just jamming with like 2 or 3 people, or improvising intuitively, let's hope, you might end up with some kind of like amazing turnaround, but it won't be because you've decided it's going to be grand. It's because that's actually what happened.
Right. That's beautiful. I really like that. All right. Well, let's move on to the next song. Take up thy stethoscope and walk.
Mm-hmm.
As you had already mentioned, it's the only Roger Waters song on this record.
Yes. It's it's almost not even a song. I mean, there's just that one bass riff, dun 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 dun, dun. Mm-hmm. And then it's got the inverted, instead of going down like old Barrett song, dee, 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 dee. His goes da 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 da, just goes up, and then da da da, but it's the same riff as dun da da. But still, it's a cool song.
Yeah,
and the sentiment, and the stops and the starts, and then those improvisations, they kind of peak up and then they come around again. It's like good jazz, except for it's a psychedelic rock band. Even if these guys aren't incredible musicians, they're intuition and interaction, like particularly, you know, Richard Wright and Sid Barrett, the guitar and the keyboards are what just shine on this. It's just this counter effect. And I remember a good friend of mine who really liked Piper at the Gates of Dawn. She said the guitar solo on Take Up Thy Stethoscope and Walk is the ugliest guitar solo she's ever heard in her life. God, I love it. You know, like he was just completely abandoning anything. He was just making sounds, you know.
Right.
That's like really kind of that's what appealed to me. I still do that, you know. I mean, Hendrix was doing it too, but those were the two guys that were doing it in that world, and then you know Stockhausen and John Cage was doing it in the other world, and Eric Dolphy and Ornette Coleman was doing it, and Sun Ra was doing it in another world.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I love how that has kind of developed into a thing, like where it's not, you know, considered poor playing to utilize an instrument for whatever sound effect you can get out of it, as opposed to kind of a traditional style of playing.
Right.
So Take Up Thy Stethoscope and Walk. The immediate standout lyrics to me from this are: music seems to help the pain, seems to motivate the brain. So I know that music for you has also been a source of quite literal pain. But can you tell me of a time where you saw it as a help?
Oh, like lots of times. I mean, this is more recent, and it's almost absurd, but it underlines how music can do it. Trump had just won the election. I was in Rochester, New York. The world, you know, was so terrible, just so fucking terrible. And we're getting coffee. It was with Alloy Orchestra, and the Dave Clark 5 came on. It was something like Any Way You Want It or Bits and Pieces. And it just like, there's hope, you know? I mean, it's like this ridiculous song. It was just written to be a pop schlock hit. But there was something about it. It made me feel like, well, you know, Trump's president, but I'm not going to die. We're going to keep going and we're going to do the best we can. Like it gave the Dave Clark 5, for God's sake.
Yeah.
Filled me with hope, you know? So that's like a real extreme example. That's not like, you know, listening to Bela Bartok's music for strings, percussion, and celeste and feeling like super profound, which I also do.
Sure.
But you know, the Dave Clark 5 can do it too.
Yeah. I mean, anything can. It just matters of the situation, which obviously for this situation that you're mentioning was particularly dire feeling.
Yeah, context is everything. Like people say, what's your favorite song? And I go, you know, I could say like Piper at the Gates of Dawn is my favorite record, but if I put that on one time, it might not be something I want to listen to at all. So is it now not my favorite record? Like, you know, it's right. The context is everything.
Absolutely. All right, so we're going to move on to side 2 of the record, and the opening track is Interstellar Overdrive.
They had to put that last on the American version. The last
track.
So
it was the last track of the album?
Yeah, for the first release. The American release, I'm pretty sure, was the last track. Because those long instrumentals, you don't really want them at the top of the record. You want something that's more catchy. You know?
I would say that's what I would argue. I mean, Interstellar Overdrive, that's a pretty catchy song. I mean, it's certainly grabbing.
I think so too. But here's what I heard. I read this somewhere that, and maybe you've read it too, that the way Sid Barrett came up with that riff, he was trying to learn the song My Little Red Book by Love.
Yep.
Here's the riff. That's the Love song. I just got out my little red book the minute that you said goodbye. I mean, it's quite different, and the feel of it is 100% different.
Right.
But and I also felt like a kinship with that because that first band that I was in '67, we did Little Red Book. Like that was a song I really, really liked.
Oh, okay.
So maybe that's partly why I liked Interstellar Overdrive.
Yeah, and to expound on that story that you were mentioning, from what I did find in my research was that I believe it was the producer of this record, who was that, Norman Smith. I guess he was kind of like humming that song, or kind of like, you know, like singing it to himself, and that's how Sid heard it and wanted to try to learn what it was, and then that's how he kind of like got that riff. So it was just he was learning it through his humming rather than listening to the song and trying to play along with it.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I know that they recorded. I mean, they performed Interstellar Overdrive long before they recorded the record. Okay, I'm a little skeptical only because I believe they've been playing Interstellar Overdrive for a while before they recorded it.
Yeah.
And so they would have had to heard Norman Smith singing that a while earlier, but maybe they recorded, Arnold Layne maybe half a year before. I don't know.
I don't remember either. It didn't come up much in my research because it's not on this record.
Yeah. I'm just talking from my gut reaction since I did no research whatsoever.
Yeah, it's okay. No, it's but yeah, that's kind of what I saw. But now, so Interstellar Overdrive, now you had told me about your song, Infinity in a Box, off your album, Lights in the Center of Your Head, had actually been kind of directly motivated by this song.
Well, when Trinary System started, Mission of Burma was still going. I just wanted to do something. I wanted to have another way to play guitar that wasn't so overtly like always on 10, like post-punk, cranked,
Right.
And, I wanted to get, a Trinary System incorporates more of my entire history of rock music. It's much more overtly psychedelic than Mission of Burma was overtly psychedelic. And the drummer I'd played with before in a band called Binary System. I'd never played with the bass player before I asked him to join the band. Just the way he talked, that he really liked Captain Beefheart.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard one of his records. And so once we got going, and we did Miles Davis song, Black Satin from On the Corner. Like totally killer.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, and I found that we could do this improv thing. We're like, actually, we're really good at this. Because first I was just bringing in songs I'd written. And so I started working the idea of the improvised, like pieces that were longer improvised things. And we did a Can song, You Do Right. I don't know if you know the Can song. Do right, you do right.
Right.
Simple, but Can was influenced by Piper at the Gates of Dawn. Like they would just jam on a theme.
Sure.
And as we got going, and I was, Burma was still in action, but I wanted, like, what would I want to do with a different kind of rock band? And one of them was to find my own expression of Interstellar Overdrive at this point in time. And it was mostly through Can, by us doing You Do Right, that I found that we could do this kind of thing, like by having a theme, and then we would improvise off the theme. So I made up the bass line for Infinity in a Box, do 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 bum bum do 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 bum bum, which literally plays almost continuously for 8 minutes, and still the song is interesting, which is at least I believe it's interesting. And so I wanted that kind of expansive thing. Interstellar Overdrive, even the name Infinity in a Box is it's almost the opposite, but it's got a kind of a extraterrestrial vibe to it. And
yeah.
In the instrumental, after I go through these chord progressions, which is kind of like the opening theme, but then I actually have lyrics in it, which Interstellar Overdrive does not. But then afterwards, we each take a long solo. Like first it's the bass solo, but he's playing nothing but he's got a harmonizer, and it sounds more like an organ than a bass, And then actually we'll drum solo first. And Larry doesn't like to do drum solos but I say, just do lots of fills, and he really got it. And I would accompany him on like little zips and zaps on the guitar, like doing very Barrett-esque kind of gestures. So that was we interacted. It wasn't like real strict, like you guys are the rhythm section and you're the soloists. We would, while Larry was improvising, I would improvise with him and help, like he would lead somewhere and I would help push it along, and then, it would resolve again. And so there's more interaction. And then when the bass took over, we kind of pulled back, but still I would do like little scrapes with electronic sounds merging with him. And then when I did my solo, it was a little more rock steady, but still people would do fills, and this would bring us back to the theme at the end.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Now, so when you were telling me about that, how like this song kind of directly influenced that in a way. I was also kind of considering the guitar playing, the guitar sound, like everything, everything from like the Trinary System records that I've heard so far seems kind of more tied into Sid Barrett's guitar style and playing on from this record.
That's
I mean,
cool.
is that fair to say to you, or do you think, or
Could be. I honestly, I thought so much about Sid Barrett and Piper at the Gates of Dawn for so long that I've almost like partitioned it off
Mhm.
because, because I idolized it so much that it was getting in the way of my life. And partly during Mission of Burma, where I could get over my past. Like Mission of Burma was me uh, finding my footing as who I really was. Kind of like, okay, the band I started in 69 and 70, Sproton Layer, didn't go anywhere. It just tubed. And then all in the 70s, you couldn't get gigs doing creative music. And then punk rock shows up, and then I'm in Mission of Burma. And so, like, that was a real major thing. But to do that, I had to deliberately cut some ties
Mhm.
in my mind. That's
Sure.
why I cut ties with Ann Arbor. But I still have lots of friends there. I love going back now. But I had to deliberately do it to free myself up. That's like the lyric. I said my mother's dead. I don't care about it. I said my father's dead. I don't care about it. We're on the edge of Burma. We're on the edge of Burma. That's the line from the Ballad of Johnny Burma. That's like what I
Mhm.
was doing. I was killing my past so that I could live in the present. And then once I stabilized myself, I could go back into the past. Something like that. So at that
Okay.
point, I had kind of deliberately, I don't want to be psychedelic. I stopped smoking pot. It was more like, alcohol and more of a punk rock aesthetic. And I found my footing there. And then,
Right.
but now that Burma was getting done and we'd made our point, the second round of Burma was long enough to make our point. I could go back with with clear conscience and go back and look at what Barrett meant to me and all these other kind of things like that. Though I was carrying them with me all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. It was just more like a subconscious thing. It's not like you kind of like uh conscientiously was just like looked to or even kind of revisited this record before working on anything for the Trinary System.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, when
Yeah.
Burma did Astronomy Domine, I tried to play. I got. I would merge Richard Wright's organ parts and the guitar parts together because Clint was playing bass and Pete was doing the drums. So I had to be both Richard Wright and Sid Barrett. So
Oh,
sometimes I play the organ parts on the guitar or something similar enough, and sometimes the guitar, and sometimes I'd try to blend the two together. And there was like a deliberate, complete homage to Barrett. And I would sing, I'd roll my R's, whatever this, he rolls his R's in there somewhere. I can't remember where it is now. And, I try to sing make my voice sound as Barrett-esque as possible, where I don't do any of that now. But
right.
I still carry all those kind of ideas and the idea of making those kind of psychedelic guitar sounds, which now are more traditional. Lots of people make those sounds, but because I'm now, like when I got in Burma, I wanted to reject a lot of things and start anew. Now with Trinary System, I can look back and borrow from everything from my entire life.
Right.
Uh, so that's why it's more overtly psychedelic, I would say.
Hmm.
That's
Okay.
a little meandering of an answer there.
No, that's cool. I dig it. Um, let's move on to the next song. The Gnome, I did not want to cover because it's just kind of more of the same childish kind of folklorish tales.
Right, it is, but it's very much suited my interest in like the Wizard of Oz or some other, or Lewis Carroll, that whole kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it definitely has some character to it and obviously some appeal, but just as far as talking points are concerned, it's just like, okay, yeah, Grimble Grobble, got it. Yeah. But excuse me. But the next song, chapter 24, this is an interesting one.
Indeed.
Um, I mean, just kind of getting right into it. The lyrics opening line appears to be taken from
Yeah,
the I Ching's instructions for performing a divination.
yeah. It is chapter 24 called Return.
Right. Are you familiar with that book?
Mhm. Quite.
Yeah. Do you actually like have you ever used it as in practice or?
there was a while I used it in practice, and then I just realized it wasn't helping me because I was using that as a crutch. And
Hmm.
so, but so afterwards, I once read the I Ching from start to finish without using it as divination, but just as a collection of information on the human condition. It's an astounding book. The way that it describes how water works and how that relates to human interactions and stuff. It's like it's astoundingly fascinating. And here's, it's a little embarrassing to admit, but there was a period where I was using the I Ching too much, trying to make decisions about this and that. I managed to live pretty well. And I was just really pissed off. And I said, okay, I Ching, if you're going to tell me one thing, just tell that to me now. So I was really pissed off that I wasn't understanding what I was supposed to do. And I threw the 3 pennies 3 times. You don't know the I Ching probably, but
No, not really. I've heard about it a little bit, and I've heard about the throwing the pennies thing.
if there's one head and 2 tails, it's a strong line. Basically, the strong lines are yin or yang, male. The weak lines are yin, female, and they're both equally valuable. And when it's all weak lines, it's yin, the receptive. You just receive information. And what that is, it's called, the hexagram is the creative, and that's where you create and you make the world. And that's the essence of my personal self-belief. I remember once tripping and I'm going, my friends were all partying and I didn't feel like partying. I go, what the fuck is it that means something to me? And I go, it's me creating things. That's where I derive my meaning out of life. And that's pretty obvious. That's what I've done all my life. And
Right.
so I threw this I Ching and I was so pissed off, and it gave me the creative. And the odds of that were very, very low. And so I was just like, what the fuck? You're messing with my mind. And so I didn't deal with it. After that, I just kind of let it sit for a long, long time. But it's a very interesting book.
Yeah.
Using it on a regular basis for trying to solve your problems is not a good idea.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's kind of like anything, really. I mean, it's like from what I understood of the I Ching, it kind of seemed like a religious thing to me. Like people could use it in a sense, like as that kind of a crutch to rest on in a spiritual sense. Kind of looking for guidance, looking for direction. That's true?
Yes, it is. It's basically you're deferring responsibility. And I no longer agree with that whatsoever. I think it's better to be responsible to yourself. Like you're saying, well, you tell me what to do. No, you have to figure it out. And I will say this is really, really incredibly interesting. My mom, who was not a mystic in the slightest, my dad was trying to finish this book on, of course, fishes of Mexico and Guatemala, and he was having trouble finishing it. And so she said, okay, Roger, will you, this I Ching business, help me out. I'm going to throw the I Ching and you interpret it for me. I said, okay. And she didn't tell me what the question was. I had no idea what she was asking. She threw the I Ching and I knew how to read the book, and I read the book and what the lines meant. And when it was done, she said, but I am already doing all that. And I said, well, then you're doing it. Obviously this was, it wasn't like, what kind of gibberish is this? Or, what is this even talking about? It was, this is what I'm already doing. And I thought that was kind of a profound moment. The answer is you're doing the best you can, Mom, to help Dad finish this book. Or maybe, you really, it's maybe more attuned to things than you think.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
very, very interesting. I will say that in my band No Man, which was not good, but I wrote my album Wham on Express, I wrote a song called Oppression, which is a I Ching hexagram. And it's more of a heavy rock song, but I, just like chapter 24, I used all lyrics from the I Ching. It was a direct response to chapter 24. I wrote Oppression. Yeah, the superior man stakes his life on following his will. That's the message of the I Ching.
Right. Okay.
But go on. So this quite you triggered quite a meandering.
No, that's okay. I mean, that's kind of what I'm looking for in this show. It's like I'm trying to dig into these little nooks and crannies of another person's mind through music.
Here it is.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and then this thing specifically, I mean, like I knew going into it, it's like, okay, wait, I have to figure out more about the I Ching, which I've heard about in the past. So
Mhm.
it was kind of interesting, like section for me to kind of like do a little bit of research that I've already kind of been meaning to get into.
Mhm.
Um, so let's see. So the I Ching, it's a loose description of what that chapter has to do with is sometimes we need to stop and go back. This can arise when we have taken an improper course or the wrong path and need to return to where we started.
Mhm.
Other times we can get so far away from who we really are that return is necessary to reconnect with the core part of us that has remained unchanged over time.
Mhm.
So, with this description in mind, what was the circumstance of the Burma reunion?
Yeah, God. Um, I was the person that somebody wanted to put on a show at the Avery Fisher Hall at the Lincoln Center in New York City, the Yola Tango, and they said, Burma hadn't. This was 2001. Burma hadn't played since '83, and they said we want Burma to play. I was the guy they talked to. I was just going to tell them we're not going to do it, and I said, well, I should at least ask the other guys, and of course they're going to say we're not going to do it because people have asked us many times before. I
Right.
said, we're not going to do this, but do you want to do? This guy's asking about a Burma reunion. He goes, yeah, let's do it. I go, what? Like, you want to do a Burma reunion? He goes, yeah, yeah, that would be really fun. I go, okay, well, Pete. Hopefully Pete will say no. And Pete said, yeah, let's do it. Because his group had just broken up, peer group.
Oh yeah.
And so it's like, I couldn't do anything about it. I had to, okay, that's the way Burma works. If two people want to do it, you do it. And so
Right.
Burma, we're going to just play like a few shows. We're going to play one show in Boston and one show in New York, which became 4 shows in Boston, 4 sold out shows in Boston, 2 sold out shows in New York City. And then someone asked us, Bob Weston, who was doing our tape loops, Shellac was playing Altamont Parties in London, one of those festivals.
Right.
And we'd never played Europe. So, yeah, let's do that one too. And then we started, we'd all written one song because that was a rule. We had to have one new song because we didn't want to just be hauling out the old war horses. We want to act as if we're a band.
Right.
So even for those first shows, we all had one new song. And then by the time we got to ATP, I think we had another new song. And then all of a sudden we realized, oh my God, we're still rehearsing, we're learning new songs, and we could play, we could play the Fillmore and the West Coast. And then we just didn't stop for a long time.
Yeah.
It was a complete accident. Like almost everything Burma did. Just we stumbled along.
Right.
They made the documentary, not a photograph. They made the documentary based on the fact that we're just going to play a few shows and then stop. And the fact that we kept playing completely destroyed the documentary because there was no ending. That was kind of good.
Right.
So that's how it happened, and it just kept going until the end. And at the end, I was the only one writing, and I go, I'm going to stop writing if you guys don't write. And they didn't write, so I said, I think we should stop because if we're not all writing, we're not a living entity. Unless you want to record an album of all my songs, and they go, well, we can't do that. That wouldn't be a Burma record. Well, if you're not writing, then I'm going to stop, and we should probably stop. And then we molded over this way and that, and we all kind of realized, okay, yeah. It's like it's time for us to stop.
Yeah.
It was kind of an accident.
Yeah. And it had gone on for so long. I mean, like I remember talking to Pete about it, and he was just like, yeah, what was supposed to be just a kind of a few shows ended up being what, 12 years, was it?
So, something like that.
Yeah. So it was just like twice to 3 times as long as your original start.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's cool though. I mean, like that you actually got to make some new music out of it and put out some new records and so forth, and obviously reap the benefit of being heralded as an influential punk band. One of the originals, really.
Yeah, post punk. And it's funny because I was in the group called the Alloy Orchestra, now the Anvil Orchestra, that does silent film accompaniment. And I remember we played the Telluride Film Festival in 1998. And, and I was the new guy in the band, and I was name dropping Mission of Burma, hoping that someone would think I was cool, and nobody had ever heard of Mission of Burma. But
Right.
like 3 years later, in 2002, or 4 years later, I could go to Telluride, and people knew who Mission of Burma was. Like this, really, the fact that we reformed lifted us literally from out of the distant mud into the into the light. It was like,
Yeah.
and two of the records are really good. The Obliterati and
Yeah.
Unsound, they're both, I think, really good records. They have a lot of ideas on.
I think so. Yeah. I just listened to those recently. Yeah. And yeah, it's very cool. I mean, it's just so interesting how you guys never really planned to do anything, as you're saying, and came up with so much good music, and then have that rebirth of your career, so much later.
Yeah, people would say that it was like, we folded in '83, and it was as if, '83, 2002 was just, we're just continuing from the same place. We had the same repertoire, except for we had a couple of new songs, and then we added more new songs. As if all those years in between hadn't happened.
Yeah.
Something like that. That was a joke.
There's a space-time continuum break.
Definitely this infinity in a box, as it were.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to the next song, "The Scarecrow."
Mm-hmm.
Um.
Again, very Wizard of Oz, like
Oh yeah.
format.
Yeah. I didn't even think about that. But there's certainly, the song contains nascent existentialist themes, as Barrett compares his own existence to that of the Scarecrow, who, while quote unquote sadder, is also quote unquote resigned to his fate.
Life's not
What's that?
Life's not unkind. He doesn't mind.
Mm-hmm. Right.
He doesn't mind. Yeah, it's not that bad.
It's not that bad. It's another song that's, kind of similar to like the Gnome and maybe Matilda Mother, in a sense that they're kind of like flowery, kind of mystical, but resigned to fate kind of sticks with me. And yeah, I mean, it's an interesting concept to be resigned to fate. And with that being said, I'm curious how Trinary System came to be.
Towards the end of Burma's second existence, Mach 2, I was just getting tired of always playing in this post-punk style. And somebody had asked me, "How do you think Burma would play a party?" And I go, well, "Burma's not going to play your party. We're way too loud. And do you have, are you going to pay us? But I could put together a band, and it just didn't happen. And then I just got to me thinking, like it would be fun to play non-post-punk guitar playing. And that is what started Trinary System. And the fact that that little trigger, like, it wasn't in my first idea until someone asked me to do that, right, to play this party. And I thought, yeah, that would be cool to play a different style of guitar playing, and which would inherently draw back on every other style that I'd played. And again, Andrew Willis, the bass player, he had engineered some Alloy Orchestra recordings, and he asked some really interesting questions. He goes, "Are you playing quarter note triplets there?" And which the other two guys in Alloy Orchestra wouldn't even know what that meant. Like, I'm just saying. And anyway. And I thought, well, this guy's really paying fucking attention here. And then he offered some technical assistance on some other things. Then he was in this band that had opened up for Shellac, and Weston said, "Oh yeah, I love those guys." I go, "Okay, well, here's this guy. He's a guitar player. If I'm going to put a band together," Larry Durst, the drummer in Binary System, my piano and drum duo that made 3 records, Larry is like an incredible drummer. His feel is really excellent. And I knew he could do anything I wanted. But Andrew, who I'd never heard play an instrument, though we'd talked about Captain Beefheart, and I did hear a recording of one that he had done, but I'd never seen him play. And he was a guitar player. So I thought, perfect, he'll be the bass player in my band. Like, and again, okay, in that sense, that's what Noel Redding was. Noel Redding was a guitar player, but was forced to play bass. But I didn't want someone like Noel Redding. To me, was a guy who thought, this is how you play bass. A guitar player's view of how you play bass, which is really simplistic and dull. Like I was a bass player when I saw Hendrix play at a club the size we're at, and I was like, Noel Redding was the least interesting member. The drummer, Mitch Mitchell was incredible, and Hendrix.
Oh yeah.
Why is the bass player so dull?
Huh.
But I knew Andrew Willis would not play like that. Andrew Willis would play like he was a guitar player. And that's what I wanted. But he could play the bass. And sometimes I tell him, don't just hang down there, put in some more shit, because he sometimes lapses into thinking this is what bass players should do. And
it's supposed to be rhythm, right?
And I'm glad he does. That means he's not like thinking like I'm going to be a guitar player and I'm going to like kick your ass and everybody's ass. But he's such an intuitive musician, and all I have to do is say, yeah, do a little more than it. Okay, and then it shows up, and he comes up with these riffs. I come up with some pretty oddball riffs, and he comes up with counterpoint oddball riffs. They're like, wow. And then once Larry gets the groove down. So that's how the band started. And it started out being just a bunch of songs that I cobbled together of my own. Like we did Loose for Sam. We did the Sproton Layer song, In the Sun, this and that. I don't think we ever did any Burma songs. We later did She Said, which was pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
That was cool. Good. And but gradually, when we did the Miles Davis tune, I realized that we could get this heavy groove going and improvise them. Like Andrew locked in with Larry, and I could play this freeform guitar and bring out my cornet, do some fake Miles horn blowing. And then they could also improvise too. And that's where gradually I learned what the band was supposed to do. Like it took me quite a while because we hardly ever played. Burma was going on at the same time, and we'd play 6 shows a year. You learn by playing 12, 20 or 30 shows a year. But I think we're really good. I think our next record is going to be very different.
Yeah, cool. And speaking of that, where is that at right now, the new record?
We're recording it at the end of July at Guilford Sound, which is in Guilford, Vermont. Like it's in the middle of the woods, but it's like a world-class studio. Like, yeah, astounding. I helped them choose the Steinway grand piano they have. I recorded my Dream Interpretation record there that's coming out in August. I have a record coming out called 8 Dream Interpretations for Solo Electric Guitar Ensemble. All the music is structured by dreams. Hey, Sid Barrett.
Cool.
But you'd recognize a little bit of Barrett influence in there. It doesn't sound anything like Pepper the Gates of Dawn, but some of the psychedelic elements. But that's where we're recording. Trinary System is going to record at the same studio. I love the engineers, completely cool guys there. And where these 2 shows upcoming, we're breaking in a lot of new material so that we are comfortable with it and know it well enough that we can kind of fuck with it in the studio.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. So I saw you guys play at the Middle East upstairs with MSSV. And that was my introduction to your band, and you guys were excellent. Speaking of Larry, your drummer, I thought he was a great drummer. He seemed to have more of a jazz influence. Is that correct? He kind of played like his playing style, just like the physicality. I saw it as him being a little jazzy.
I mean, most of the time around town, he plays in almost like traditional stuff. He just does, Ringo-esque backbeats behind singer-songwriters and almost Americana stuff. But when he plays with me, anybody who plays with me is going to be pushing the limit just by the nature of it. It's funny. I don't think of him as being jazzy, but that could very well be the case. That's interesting. His feel is really good. Like I remember playing a show. We played 2 shows in a row once. I like playing 2 shows in a row because it really breaks in the new songs, 2 shows right in a row. And one night, we were playing at Johnny D's in Boston, and these Eastern European girls came up and said, "You're a bass player. He is fantastic." And I'm going, "But I'm Roger Miller, and your bass player, he is fantastic. Can you introduce us to your bass player?" Well, here's Andrew. And the next night, a guy came up with, "God, your drummer is incredible." I go, Come on, man. I'm running away from
Am I
this.
doing nothing up here? What?
What mistakes have I made? But that makes me feel good. Like sometimes that's what people bonded on to. Like, there they thought it was the bass player. Here is the drummer. Someplace they think it's the guitar player, whoever the hell he is.
Right.
And so that's what I like. I mean, I really like whenever I have a band, in almost every band I've been, I've tried to make everybody equal. Like in Burma, like Secrets. It's not a guitar solo, it's a drum solo. Like it just Pete's going around bashing on it, and Martin was doing tape loops off it, but drum solo, yeah. And there's bass, I give bass solos too, and Clint wrote a lot of bass solos. He should have written a little more guitar solos. But so I always think of the band, the members as being equal. Like there's not like, the idea that one person leads and everybody else follows. That just doesn't interest me. That's like, Bob Dylan or something.
Right.
I like a lot of Bob Dylan music, but that's not what I'm looking for. I guess in that sense, it is more like a jazz ensemble where, when you see Coltrane, you're thinking about Jimmy Garrison too. And, Andrew Searle never played with Coltrane. He played with Cecil Taylor, but you really notice everybody who's playing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, your band is great. I mean, Andrew and Larry both like just obviously astute musicians and like can keep up with the weirdness that you're doing. So
yeah,
they got to be good.
Yeah, if they can't take it, they would be out of there. They wouldn't have gone there in the first place.
Right. So now I have a couple more things for you, a couple more questions before one question before we get to the last song though. One thing I kind of would like to know about was that do you think most of your fans, like from back in the Burma days, thought that you ended your career when you stepped away from Burma due to your tinnitus?
The thing that I stepped into after that was Bird Songs of the Mesozoic, which was like keyboards, almost minimalist. I have some mixed feelings about some of that, but some of it was really good. We did some really cool shit. But a lot of people that like my work in Burma were like, what the hell are you doing, Roger? This keyboard shit. But that was the beginning of it. And then I'd go back to guitar and then keyboard and then the more jazzy and this and that and then the guitar. And then pretty soon now everybody's good. Okay, I like this part of what Roger does and this part. But he's a really interesting guy, so I'll come see him here. And it's no longer I fell off a cliff and went into Bird Songs of the Mesozoic. It's now more like, well, of course, the next record he's going to do has nothing to do with the other band that he's in. Like my other band, I'm playing prepared piano. This one, I'm playing electric guitar. This one, I'm writing music for string quartet with two turntables, or I'm doing silent film accompaniment. People are now used to it, and no one now thinks I have destroyed my life and ruined their.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're obviously, maybe that's what fans initially from like the early period of Burma didn't know about you, is that you actually have this ability to just kind of make any type of music, and obviously that's what you want to do. You're willing to challenge yourself and to create just about anything, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I've been writing a lot of even solo piano music recently, and then the problem is I started thinking, oh, I should make a solo piano album. It's like, no, Roger, stop. You got to finish the Trinary System record first. You have the 8 dream interpretations for solo electric guitar coming out, and you're touring with the Anvil Orchestra. And I also have art installation. It's now going to the second art museum, the 3S Art Space in
cool.
New Hampshire, which is my modified vinyl where I play games with records. The first one I made in 1986 and it was reviewed in 88. Do you know the artist Christian Marclay?
No, I can't say I do.
He's rather huge, like the Tate Museum, if you know that kind of stuff. He's had major retrospectives there, and he made records. Record without a cover was one of his first things, and the idea was that you'd never put a cover on and get more scratches. I made at the same time before that, because I didn't know he was doing that. I made a record out of nothing but record noise. So I recorded my record collection, but only the spaces before and after the music. So you get various types of pops.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had 12 minutes of that cut to an acetate. And then every time you play the acetate, which wears away quickly, old pops wear away because the record wears away and new ones appear. So you have a record that is constantly evolving. and never gets any worse. Like most records start off perfect, and the more you play them, they get scratches, but they get worse, and the only change is that they get worse. But this one is, it's a conceptual piece of conceptual art. It's a
Right.
constantly changing thing, and it never gets any worse. It's the only record like that.
Hmm.
That doesn't get any worse the more you play it.
Yeah, right.
That was my first thing, pop record evolving. And that's one of the records that's in my modified vinyl. Another one is the Signals, Calls, and Marches lyric sheet.
Yeah. No, I don't know it because I've never had a copy of it.
The lyric sheet was, this is a classic Burma thing, but the lyric sheet was all the lyrics in alphabetical order. So the first lyric was that's like in red or something. And the last one was you. Probably, I don't think we had any Z words. You showed up. And it was up to me to listen to all the songs. There's 5 songs with lyrics. I wrote 4 of them. And then Clint wouldn't tell me the lyrics to Revolver, so I had to listen to it. And so then I would get all of them, and then I would put them in alphabetical order. And then I had Holly, who was doing our album cover, she made a lyric sheet. And the lyric sheet was the lyrics listed in alphabetical order.
Oh, wow.
Because lyric sheets were really popular. So here was our version of a lyric sheet, kind of a Dada error. And so for one of my modified vinyls is, those are all the lyrics that are on the record. And then I had those lyrics etched onto vinyl, like with this inking process that Third Man Records does.
Mm-hmm.
So now all the lyrics that are on the record are actually on the record. It's games of that ilk.
Okay.
Conceptual stuff. Another one I'm working on now is I'm drawing with sound. So if you have a blank record, there's nothing on it. But if you put a record at 33 1/3 revolves every 1.8 seconds. So if you put a really loud record pop, and I have lots of sampled sounds, every 1.8 seconds for 20 minutes, you will be able to see on the record a straight line going from the edge to the center.
Uh-huh.
And after that, I've made geometric shapes by doing mathematical equations and extending and shortening the sounds before and afterwards. So this one's called audio, visual, audio, where I take audio to create a visual, and then you can play it and listen to it again and to hear how the visual translates back to audio.
Yeah.
So it's stuff like that. That's part of my art installation.
Oh, wow. That sounds really cool, man. So when is that going to be available to see?
It was at the Brattleboro Art Museum exactly when COVID hit. So,
okay.
But the virtual gallery is actually on my website somewhere if you go to the conceptual art pages. But it will be at 3S Art Space in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, towards the end of November through the middle of January.
Oh, okay.
It'll be up on the wall, and each one of them has something on the wall to look at, and also a turntable that you listen to with headphones. So you'll listen to the pop record evolving, or that's what it is. That's what's funny about this. You see the Signals, Calls, and Marches lyrics printed on the record on the wall, but on the record that you listen to, which is a 7-inch, I isolated every one of those words. So it goes, around, scream. They're all just completely isolated, and they're back to back, and they make some interesting. It's kind of hard to listen to in some ways, but particularly if you know the record at all, it's a real mindfuck.
Sure. Yeah. Sounds it.
So so you have something to play the record to with headphones, and then there's something to look at also for each one of these modified vinyl pieces.
Yeah. Cool, man. Yeah, I definitely want to check that out. That's a good time frame. It's like when the family takes the road trips anyway. So we'll probably make it up to New Hampshire. That'd be fun.
Yeah, I'm doing my guitar show, I think December 2nd at that venue. The Dream Interpretations, 8 Dream Interpretations for Solo Electric Guitar Ensemble, where I have 3 lap steel guitars on legs, and 2 of them are prepared, like with bolts and alligator clips.
Mm-hmm.
So they sound like a John Cage or a Harry Part. Do you know Harry Partch at all?
I've never listened to him, but I've been turned on to him recently as far as just like I do record resale, so I look out for Harry Partch all the time.
Yeah. It sounds kind of like that. And then the other lap steel over here is all tuned to a unison E, so I get really thick melodies. I play that with a regular slide. And then I also have a Strat. And then I have a looping machine, so I can set up these patterns in the prepared thing, press a button, that'll repeat. Then I can hit a chord, and then that will come in backwards against that. And then anyways, it goes from there until it's very layered up and fairly unorthodox. It becomes a solo electric guitar ensemble, basically.
Yeah. Okay.
It's all structured by dreams. So it's going to be a really interesting record, and the performance is very difficult.
Okay. I'm looking forward to it. Sounds like it's very interesting to get into.
Yeah, it'll be intense.
All right. Well, so I only really have one question left for you, based on the last song, Bike.
Huh.
So there's not much to say about this song. I mean, I've known this song forever. It's very typical, Syd Barrett style. Seems very straight and simple. But I have noticed that you also have a track on your full-length album named Bike. I'm assuming I'm pronouncing that correctly. Bike.
Yeah, it's got an exclamation point. Mike Watt played it on his show, and he said, "Yeah, I thought it was going to be the Barrett song." I said, "You didn't see the exclamation point? It's a different song." I mean, originally I was really excited because when I moved to Boston from Quincy, I didn't have a car for 8 years. I just rode my bicycle.
Yeah.
When in those days, I was the only bike at the intersection. Like occasionally there'd be another bike. By the time I left Boston, there'd be like 5 or 6 bikes at the intersection, and the thrill was gone. But I really liked riding a bike. I liked physical activity, and it was super cost effective. It doesn't cost anything. You can park anywhere.
Right.
It was just really, really fun, and it made you healthier too.
Yeah, absolutely. I used to do a lot of biking myself. I don't really have a good excuse to why I don't anymore, really.
I just had the excuse I didn't have money to buy a car. And, Boston's a pretty small town, so you can, if the weather's bad, you can take the T.
Yeah.
But I mean, the thing about Bike, I mean, it is that kind of cheerful, like, Lewis Carroll Barrett-esque kind of nonsense. He's just talking about his daily life. He probably did have a little mouse called Jeremy, but then he has that bam, bam, this kind of this irrational chop, and it goes, now, it's like, that's like you're turning the page or something to a new theme. Now he's talking about the mouse. Now he's talking about the house. Now, and then right. I've got, but the clincher of it is the last verse, which slows down. I've got a room, a musical tomb, some wine, some cheap, most of them are clockwork. Let's go into the other room and make them work. And then you hear the steps, the door opens, and then you hear all these crazy sounds, these machine sounds in the other room. Which is a really kind of, he's creating a story, and then, he's creating a story with the music. And you listen to that end sound, if you slow it down, it's laughter. I don't know if they mentioned that.
Yeah.
But by the time it's played, it's got this manic, and I just get the sense as like that was Syd just kind of hanging on at the end there, like somewhere around when he finished that song, things were starting to go. But maybe not. Maybe he was in his most chipper state.
Yeah, I don't know, but I did hear about that little recording trick they did with the laughter, and I think they sped it up and that did it backwards, maybe even. I don't know.
Might have been backwards too.
Yeah. But it was weird because it just sounds like most people will interpret it as like a little duck quack or something, like some little kind of like squeak thing, but it's actually them laughing.
Right, and it only comes in at the end too, so it's like it's a compositional element. It's like, okay, here's a new thing, and I think the song comes to an abrupt stop. Is that correct? And it stops, I think, the last time.
I think you might be right. I don't remember it very well.
But it's, it's not just goofy shit. I mean, it's quirky, it's childish, like, let's laugh and speed it up. But it's actually, he's using it as a compositional tool at the end to like signal that, like we're concluding this room of just like, like a twittering machine, it's a painting by Paul Klee. It sounds like the soundtrack for Paul Klee's painting, The Twittering Machine. It's just kind of like wind up birds and little dots that go around.
Oh, okay.
But you know that those guys were like really into the sounds that they were making, and it was just like, yeah, who needs a backbeat? Let's just listen to this, you know?
Yeah, yeah. They definitely, I mean, have evolved since this record. Obviously, throughout their career into like these master like recorders. Like all of their records always have these like elements that are just masterfully done, and like in a studio, like you can just know that they've just have somebody or they themselves are just so intrigued by the studio and like all the different sounds that they can put together and like meld in one way or another. And it's just it's always been like really fascinating for me as far as their entire catalog is concerned.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, I kind of lost them towards the like after. I mean, Echoes. I liked Echoes. I thought Gilmore's playing was really good on that. But I mean, there's things on Wish You Were Here that I think are amazing. Like, there's too many of those kind of low-key, bluesy instrumentals. Like, where's like Power Toke, where they're like just cranked, you know? But still, there's stuff on Wish You Were Here that's just like terrifyingly good. Like a couple of those songs, you know, on the title track, that synthesizer patch, and you just know, man, God,
yeah, oh yeah.
They knew that things were fucked. You know? They weren't just making this shit up.
Yeah, yeah. So going back to bike quickly, I just wanted to ask you if there was any connection between your bike and Pink Floyd's bike.
Not really. I think the original title for mine. Oh, this is why the song was originally called "Airplane Song" because I wrote the entire song on an airplane. Alloy Orchestra had been on the West Coast for 2 weeks, and I was on the plane. I go, God, I just want to rock, and I couldn't rock, so I just wrote it all, just imagining the chords and the melodies. When I came home, they all were right, which I was pretty pleased with. So
Wow.
I called it "Airplane Song" because I wrote it on an airplane. And then, but it's the song is an inversion of "Walk Don't Run." Walk Don't Run goes da 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 da, and bike goes da 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 da. So instead of going up and down, it goes down and up. Like I was deliberately doing that. It's the same chords as Walk Don't Run, also, but instead of going ding 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 ding, they go da 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 da. So it's like I wanted to write this, you know, in honor of that kind of guitar playing. Like Trinary System was just beginning to happen. We might not have even started yet. And so when I came home and started to think it needed a title other than Airplane Song, it's Don't Walk, Don't Run, Bike. Like instead of Walk, Don't Run, but like I was really into riding my bike. Like I just love riding my bike. So it was originally called Don't Walk, Don't Run, Bike. And then I just shortened it to just Bike. I realized then that, of course, that referenced the Barrett song, but that's how it got there. There's no direct correlation other than anytime I can make any connection with Barrett, it makes me kind of happy about it. You know?
Right. All right. Cool. So well, that's it. That concludes the record. We are done with Piper at the Gates of Dawn. Whew. I just gotta say I'm relieved. This record was freaking me out for a little while.
How so?
Well, it's you know, Pink Floyd is one of those bands, just, you know, massive, monumental, has so many fans that, you know, read into them and, you know, live their lives based on songs and so forth. You know, it's just and then this record, I mean, it's a tough record. It's the only one in their catalog that's really like this one, you know, and that's obviously based on the Syd Barrett influence, because this is a heavy Syd Barrett record compared to every other one, because he was gone for every other one.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and it's, I mean, but you can even feel like, you know, even the beats on Loose for Sam, or, you know, Power Toke, or like the drumming, you know, dum, 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 or Astronomy Dominates, or even at the end of Interstellar Overdrive, he just starts up again, like that we didn't talk about that, but it's like, that is such a peculiar thing to end it with that. Like
Hmm.
once Barrett's detuned his guitar string down to the, and then there's just suddenly this peppy little drum beat. And it's as if like, oh yeah, and now we're going back to life as normal. Like after that kind of a vibe.
Yeah.
But I mean, there are people that believe that and Sauce Full of Secrets and maybe Uma Guma are the only really important Pink Floyd records, and I am one of those people.
Yeah.
But I don't completely agree with that because I think "Wish You Were Here" is brilliant. I didn't like "Dark Side of the Moon," though I did see the concert. Really good makeout music. I was stoned with my girlfriend. The slow, dreamy music, so perfect for making out. I didn't bring
Oh
up
yeah.
the band, but I had a really good band. Uh, but yeah, yeah, yeah. But definitely with Barrett, it was a little more high energy and witty, and it wasn't as dark. I mean, even though Barrett had a lot of dark elements to it,
Right.
but even you see, there's a song. I think Barrett was still in the band at the time. I heard of them doing uh, somewhere in a European tour. It might have been just when Gilmore joined, and Waters had written a song called "One in a Million." Like you're one in a million, but it's like very sarcastic and cutting, like like his next song, which was Corporal Clegg, which is a brutal takedown of I think his dad or something.
Oh yeah.
Like just wow, this guy's got a bone to spur or whatever it is, a bone to
Yeah.
go over someone's head. I can't remember the phrase.
Right. Which like led into his whole obsession with the military and obviously losing his father in the war and
Yeah,
whatever trauma he's gone through for with that.
right. And whereas Barrett was more like whimsical, a little lighter, but interestingly, the music was more energetic,
Hmm.
and everybody played faster. Like even Nick Mason was playing like really peppy beats. And after Sauce Full of Secrets, there was all that super slow, languid, kind of slightly tripped out. And
Right.
I saw them on every tour. Like after Sauce Full of Secrets, I saw the Uma Guma tour, all the tours up through Dark Side of the Moon. I saw every single tour except for the Piper the Gates Dawn tour.
Oh
And
wow.
they were good in all those shows.
Yeah, yeah. They kind of grew up. I think that's the what I've heard about it is this like the band was essentially a group of professors and like Sid was like the one like kind of counterpoint. He was the one that was, obviously more whimsical because he had the childish influence over him. He was more he was kind of just more giddy, I guess, in a sense, in a way.
But if you hear interviews, he's the least talkative of any of them. Like he's really quiet.
Right.
There's an interview in Canada, and Waters is like, kind of dominating the whole thing, and everything he says is really strong. And Barrett's going, well, we don't really try to play loud, stuff like that. It's like, okay, Sid, whatever,
Yeah. Well, so tell me about the show that you guys are going to be doing, because you're going to be in Providence on the 24th of June.
Yeah, at dusk. I know we're playing with Mini Beast, quite obviously.
Yep.
I don't know the other bands.
Uh, Department of Teleportation.
It sounds about right. Infinity in a Box, Interstellar Overdrive, Department of Teleportation, and all coming together. So yeah. I mean, I'm looking forward to it. I haven't played Providence with Trinary System for a while, and it's always fun to play with Mini Beast. And then as I said, I sit in with them on cornet, and if they want me to play guitar, whatever you want me to do, I'll do it. We did.
Yeah.
We did something from Sauce Full of Secrets the last time I was in Providence with Mini Beast.
Oh, okay.
No, it wasn't that. It wasn't Let There Be. Maybe it was Set the Control. No, it wasn't Set the Controls. One of those. One of those from Sauce Full of Secrets. I can't remember which one it was.
Yeah.
Controls. Maybe it was Set the Controls by the Sun.
So, what are you planning on doing another Pink Floyd song this time around too?
No,
No.
but if Pete says, okay, Roger, we want you to sit in with this, with Bike. Okay, sure. I'll sit in. I'll make the funny sounds.
Yeah. All right. And then the following evening you're playing in Boston again, is it?
Yeah, we're playing at the Jungle, which is in Somerville. We're headlining that one. The band before us is Landowner. They're from Pioneer Valley area. They are my favorite. I love Mini Beast too, but Landowner just fucking blows my mind.
Yeah.
They're like the super taut, God, I can't explain it. Somewhere between Captain Beefheart and the Minutemen. The lyrics are all like weirdly political, but not overtly political, and yet they're delivered in such a peculiar fashion, and yet it's so convincing.
Hmm.
It's stuff that I would never have occurred to me to do, and that always fascinates me. Like the very first time I saw them, I bought their cassette. It's a cassette I play in my car all the time. I mean, they have one song that's the opening lyric is even more appalling. Like, as if you've been talking to him for like half an hour, and he's talking about something you've been talking about, and yet it's out of the blue, and it's like, wow.
Huh. Interesting.
Landowner, I adore that band. I think they're just utterly fantastic. And then the other band, Wrong, I've just heard Andrew Willis found them. They're very noisy in a more regularly noisy way, but really, I would say Captain Beefheart elements in there too. The way their song structures are chopped up, I am expecting them to be really interesting. Landowner isn't noisy so much as super taut, and then we're like our noise is a little more casual, more psychedelic, I guess.
Right. Cool. All right. Well, hey, I'm looking forward to seeing you there because I will definitely be there at the Providence show at least.
Cool.
And it's been a wonderful time talking with you about this really particular and important record.
Yeah.
I didn't want to take too much of your time. I mean, I know that I know 2 hours seemed like a lot for you.
Once I got my double IPA, and literally I've only had just a little over half the beer, but that made time flow.
Yeah,
So
there you go.
I forgot about time entirely.
And
also once you start talking about Piper at the Gates of Dawn and this kind of stuff, and you conjure up all those memories, time is fluid.
Sure. It can even be a little irrelevant at times.
Quite.
All right, Roger. Well, hey, you have a good night. Thanks again for doing this.
Totally my pleasure, and we'll be in touch.
Absolutely. I'll see you the 24th.
Sounds good.